They walked into banks like businessmen, calm, clean, and clocked to the second. No yelling, no masks, no chaos. Just 3 men with stopwatches, and the nerve to pull off $15 million in robberies without firing a single shot. But who were they, and how did they vanish into thin air after every heist like magicians of crime? This isn't a movie. It's the true story of the stopwatch gang trio, so methodical, so disciplined, and so unusually polite that they baffled both Canadian and American authorities for over a decade. You're about to enter a world where charm was a weapon, timing was everything, and justice always seemed just one step too slow. It all starts with 3 names: Patrick "Paddy" Mitchell, Lionel Wright, and Stephen Reed, each one a master of his own role in this flawless machine. Paddy Mitchell was the charismatic ringleader. Born in Ottawa's rough Preston Street neighborhood, he was raised in a large working-class Catholic family. Street smart and magnetic, Mitchell was already deep in petty crimes by age 14. He wasn't just a thug, he had presence, charm, a silver tongue that could get him through locked doors and suspicious glances. The kind of guy who made you trust him. Right before he robbed your vault, Lionel Wright was the brain. A quiet man who lived with his mother, didn't drink, didn't smoke, and spent his nights buried in books about ancient history. But beneath that mild-mannered exterior was a strategist, a master planner who turned logistics into a criminal art. It was Wright's maps, timings, and blueprints that stitched every heist together. Then came Stephen Reed, the wild card. Born in a remote town in Ontario, one of 9 siblings, Reed's life took a dark turn early. He was dealing drugs at 13, robbing banks by 17. Convicted and sentenced, he escaped prison before ever serving the full term. He brought danger to the team, an unpredictable edge. If Mitchell was the charm and Wright the mind, Reed was the storm. The stopwatch gang wasn't just about robbing banks. They were about rewriting the rules. They timed every operation down to the second, using literal stopwatches. In and out in under 90 seconds. No blood, no mess. And never the same city twice. It started small. While working mundane jobs, Mitchell as a truck driver, Wright at a warehouse, they began quietly stealing merchandise. At first it was boxes, then trailers. They'd alter paperwork, move goods into the black market. Their bond solidified. They realized something dangerous. They were good at crime. Not just good, exceptional. Their first big heist? The 1974 Ottawa Airport gold robbery. The execution was flawless. They wore work uniforms and moved like employees. Mitchell called ahead with a fake dispatch. Reed showed up at the cargo gate, impersonating Air Canada staff. He cuffed the unsuspecting guard, broke open the lock on the gold shipment, and wheeled it out like a scheduled delivery. Outside, Wright waited in the getaway car. 20 minutes, no guns fired. $750,000 worth of gold gone, just like that. It was never just about the money. It was about beating the system, outsmarting the police, dancing on the edge of disaster and walking away untouched. And when things got hot in Canada, they didn't lay low. They relocated to Florida and kept going. From San Diego to Sedona, their heists grew bolder, faster, richer. By the 1980s, they were hitting American banks like seasoned ghosts. On September 23, 1980, they set a new record with a $283,000 haul from a Bank of America branch equivalent to over $1 million today. Again, under 90 seconds. Again, not a soul harmed. Again, gone before anyone could react. What made them terrifying wasn't just the scale, it was the elegance. Security footage often showed calm, unhurried men smiling at employees, thanking them, then disappearing. But even perfect machines can crack. The beginning of the end came from within. His name was Donnie Big John Hollingsworth, a former football player turned criminal middleman. He provided weapons. He helped fence stolen goods. But when caught in a meth operation gone deadly, he needed a get-out-of-jail card, so he flipped. He betrayed the gang for an $80,000 bail deal. To the FBI, he gave up everything: names, routines, safe houses. The trust that bound the stopwatch gang snapped like a dry twig. The betrayal wasn't just a leak, it was a flood. Suddenly, the FBI knew where to look. They found Wright and Reed hiding in the woods near Sedona, Arizona. They moved in on Halloween night, 1980. The arrest was swift and silent, exactly the opposite of the gang's legacy. Mitchell, renting a house 3 miles away, saw it coming and fled. But his freedom had a timer too. He was caught 2 years later. The final stopwatch ticked out. You'd think that would be the end of the story. It wasn't. Because this gang, they didn't go down quietly. Behind prison bars, they pulled off one last series of bold moves. They plotted their escape not with violence, but with charm, manipulation, and the same clockwork precision that made them legends. Stephen Reed, the ex-drug runner turned outlaw poet, found a way to get transferred to a lower security prison by becoming a hairstylist. No joke, he enrolled in classes, cut hair, charmed guards. Then, one day, on a supposed salon visit into town, he slipped into a bathroom and walked out the back. Gone again. Gone again. Mitchell faked a heart attack just to get to a hospital. When he was transferred, Ridnow Free showed up dressed as a doctor, revolver hidden under his coat. They broke Mitchell out in broad daylight, 2 men in white coats pushing a wheelchair and walking straight into legend. By now, the stopwatch gang wasn't just news. They were folklore, documentaries, books. Hollywood flirted with scripts. The idea of polite, clever Canadian bank robbers who never fired a bullet? People couldn't get enough. But time, unlike the gang, cannot be outrun. Mitchell, once the grinning mastermind, died in a prison hospital in 2007 from lung cancer. Wright and Reed served out long sentences. Reed eventually tried to rebuild his life raising his stepdaughter's twins, taking care of his aging mother-in-law, writing plays in a mansion overlooking the Strait of Juan de Fuca. He admitted his regrets. He admitted the myth wasn't always the truth. They weren't harmless. They were ready to use force if needed, but somehow they never had. Even so, Reed made it clear. No matter how legendary, they were still criminals. And their story? It was never meant to end with applause. But it does leave you wondering, how did they get away with it for so long? What made them so different? And how many other crews like this are still out there, watching, waiting, timing the perfect 90 seconds? Now, let's dive deeper into the betrayals, the heartbreak, and the breathtaking escapes that made the stopwatch gang not just famous but unforgettable. And trust me, you haven't heard the wildest part yet. The stopwatch gang was never supposed to fall. Not to the police, not to the law. If anything could bring them down, it would have to come from within. And that's exactly how it happened. For years, Patty Mitchell, Lionel Wright, and Stephen Reed had pulled off dozens of near-perfect bank heists. No blood, no bodies, just millions of dollars in cold cash. They were ghosts in daylight. But every ghost story eventually runs out of places to hide. And theirs? It started to unravel the moment they trusted the wrong man. His name was Donnie Hollingsworth, a former Canadian football player turned full-time criminal. To the stopwatch gang, he was an asset. He smuggled weapons, moved their stolen goods, and helped turn stolen gold into clean cash. But Donnie had a weakness, meth, and it wasn't long before that weakness led him to murder. Outside San Diego, Donnie was running a meth operation when things spiraled out of control. A man died after using his product. Donnie panicked. He tried to dispose of the body, but someone saw him. Witnesses, a dead man, and meth, it was all too much. He got caught, and with a bail set at $80,000, Donnie did what desperate men do. He offered up the stopwatch gang to the FBI in exchange for his freedom. And just like that, everything changed. Until that moment, the gang had operated with near-military precision. Every heist was timed to the second. Every escape was clean. They even had safe houses stashed in serene corners of the country, like the tranquil red rocks of Sedona, Arizona. It was there that Wright and Reed went into hiding after their record-setting $283,000 heist in San Diego. They rented forest cabins, kept their heads down, and tried to disappear into the landscape. Mitchell stayed close but kept some distance about 3 miles north. Renting a quiet house of his own, they thought they were safe. They thought the law was still guessing. They didn't know the betrayal had already been sold. On Halloween night, 1980, FBI agents moved in. They surrounded Wright and Reed's hideout, their Slide Rock State Park. There was no gunfire, no last stand, just quiet arrests. The two men who had walked in and out of vaults like they owned them were now being led away in handcuffs under the cool Arizona moonlight. But Mitchell wasn't there. He had been careful, far enough to avoid suspicion, close enough to monitor the fallout. When he saw things go bad, he vanished again. For 2 years, Mitchell stayed ahead of the feds, slipping between states, changing his look, changing his name. But time, the very thing they once mastered, was no longer on their side. Eventually, the FBI caught up with him. The leader of the stopwatch gang was finally behind bars. It seemed the story had ended. But if you thought a courtroom and a prison wall could tame this trio, you were dead wrong. Reed and Mitchell were sent back to Canada to serve their time in the Ottawa Carleton Detention Center. Wright got locked up too, and for a while it seemed like the system had won. But these men didn't just sit in their cells. They waited. They watched, and then they moved. Reed was the first to play the long game. Inside the prison, he enrolled in hairstyling classes. It wasn't about cutting hair, it was about lowering risk. He knew a barber seemed less threatening, more trustworthy. And he was right. Within months, he was transferred to the lower security Joyceville institution. That's where things started to shift. Mitchell, ever the strategist, saw the opportunity. He began mirroring Reed's good behavior. 6 months later, he too was moved to Joyceville. Now 2/3 of the gang were under the same roof again, just like the old days. Only this time their escape wouldn't come with a stopwatch. It would come with a disguise. August 1979. Reed was granted a day trip to a hair salon in Kingston, part of his barber training. One guard, one meal, one restaurant bathroom. That's all it took. Reed slipped out the back and vanished into the city like vapor, gone without a trace. 3 months later, it was Mitchell's turn. He faked a heart attack. The prison had no choice but to send him to a hospital. What they didn't know, Reed was already on the outside, plotting the rescue. Reed and an accomplice, both dressed as medical staff, stormed into the hospital with a revolver. They overpowered the guards. They wheeled Mitchell out like a patient discharge. No one saw it coming. It was the perfect performance, and they nailed it. This wasn't just an escape. It was a statement. They weren't done. For a short time, they went underground. But the world had changed. Security was tighter. Authorities more alert. The net was closing. Eventually, each member of the stopwatch gang was caught again, but their story refused to die. Reed was shipped back to the United States, facing time for old charges and new ones. Mitchell was slapped with 17 years for trafficking and another 3 for possessing stolen gold. Wright managed to pull one last trick. He escaped custody again, this time vanishing into Florida. The legend grew, but legends have limits. Mitchell, once the magnetic leader of the gang, developed lung cancer behind bars. In 2006, he was transferred to the Federal Medical Center in Butner, North Carolina, for treatment. His final days were not in a luxury suite, not in hiding, but in a prison hospital bed. He died in January 2007. No shootout. No escape, just a quiet death, far from the adrenaline-fueled life he once knew. Reed, on the other hand, found something close to redemption. After his release in 2014, he moved to a halfway house on the coast of British Columbia. He spent his days helping raise his stepdaughter's twins, chauffeuring his elderly mother-in-law, and making handmade drums. He even wrote plays. He talked openly about his regrets. He laughed at the absurdity of it all. He acknowledged the damage they'd caused. And he told the truth. There was nothing romantic about being on the run. They had been prepared to use force, but somehow they never needed to. That was the mystique. That was the myth. Polite criminals. Ghosts with charm. Men who robbed banks like clockwork, then walked into the night without a trace. But Reed said it best. It wasn't always smooth. There were close calls, near captures, and bad decisions. Looking back, he joked about what he'd do differently. "I should have hired a decoy," he once said. Someone to take the fall during the getaway. Even in his remorse, the thief in him never truly left. But there was no applause waiting for him at the end. Just quiet days, small freedoms, and the constant hum of memories that wouldn't go away. The stopwatch gang may be gone, but their legend, crafted through books, documentaries, and whispers in criminal circles, continues to fascinate. Because deep down, we're all a little seduced by the idea of pulling off the impossible. And yet, even the smartest criminals can't outrun time forever. Now, let's dive into the untold aftermath, the rise and fall of their fame, the myths that live on, and the ultimate question, did they really get away with it after all? Because some ghosts never stop haunting. You'd think that after years of robberies, escapes, betrayals, and prison time, the stopwatch gang's story would finally slow to a crawl. But it didn't. It gathered momentum, whispers turning into books, police reports morphing into documentaries. The myth didn't die behind bars. It bloomed. Because the question still burned in every investigator's notes and every journalist's pen. Did they really get caught? Or did they let themselves get caught just to disappear again later? After all, this wasn't a gang that roared into banks with AKs and ski masks. They walked in like employees, grinned at the tellers, robbed the vault, and vanished with surgical precision. They made millions in under 90 seconds. No screaming, no violence, just a stopwatch, a smile, and a plan. How many times had they done it? How much money had never been reported? What was still hidden? But let's go back to where the world thought it ended. Patty Mitchell died in 2007, alone in a prison hospital, far from the cool confidence of his heist days. He left behind a handwritten autobiography, This Bank Robber's Life, a bold title for a man who spent half of it running and the other half locked in. The book revealed a few things: his regrets, his pride, and the fact that he never once considered himself just a thief. He believed he was an artist of precision, and maybe, in a twisted way, he was. Lionel Wright, the quiet brain of the group, never made a public confession, never wrote a book, never gave an interview. He just disappeared, first from police, then from the media, then from history. Some say he died in Florida under a different name. Others say he bought a boat, sailed out of the Keys, and was never heard from again. But Stephen Reed? His ending was different. He tried to be honest. In his final years, Reed stayed in British Columbia, raising his stepdaughter's twins, helping elderly neighbors, making drums by hand. He joined writing workshops. He gave speeches about reform, addiction, the illusion of fast money. He told young people to stop idolizing criminals, to stop idolizing him. But beneath the surface, the weight of his past was never far. He once told a journalist, "I used to dream of counting stolen money in motel rooms. Now I dream of silence." Reed was released, relapsed, returned, and re-released. The prison doors kept swinging open and shut like a metronome. Tick, tick, tick. Even outside prison, he was still trapped by fame, by guilt, by the ever-present echo of everything he'd done. He died in 2018, peacefully, quietly, almost as if the stopwatch had finally stopped ticking. But then the files came out. Sealed FBI documents, long buried, revealed something nobody expected. In 1980, after Donnie Hollingsworth flipped and gave up the gang, the FBI executed raids on 5 known safe houses. Only 2 arrests were made. Inside the other houses, empty maps, fresh burner phones, suitcases packed, and in one cabin, buried under the floorboards, a sealed envelope containing coordinates, GPS numbers that pointed to a remote field in northern Ontario. When Canadian authorities finally dug into the location in 2021, they didn't find bodies or weapons. They found a buried vault. Inside it, over $800,000 in perfectly preserved U.S. currency, gold bars wrapped in wax paper, several Canadian passports, and a vintage stopwatch still ticking, even after all those years. It was labeled simply, "For the next job." The media went into a frenzy. Was this backup money? Was someone else meant to take up the mantle? Had they trained others? Or was this the ultimate backup, plan one last screw you to the system? The public was stunned. True crime forums exploded. Every former associate of the stopwatch gang was questioned. A few went missing. A journalist investigating the buried vault vanished in 2022 on a research trip to the same field. His body was never found, only his camera melted from fire, and one final image recovered from the SD card. A blurred photo of what appeared to be a man in his 60s, standing near a tree, holding a stopwatch. You think the story's over? It's not. You can't kill a legend born in silence, dressed in politeness, and perfected in 90 seconds. Because somewhere out there, someone still has the plans, the blueprints, the maps, the time. Maybe it's a new crew. Maybe it's someone who was watching all along, learning. Maybe it's someone who was never caught. Maybe Wright isn't dead. Maybe Mitchell left more vaults behind. All we know is this: the stopwatch gang redefined what it meant to pull off the perfect crime. They never needed bullets, only time. And time might still be on their side. Don't blink. Don't look away. Because while you're watching for chaos, someone right now is walking into a vault with a smile and a ticking watch. And by the time you realize what's happened, they'll already be gone.